just a second.
Sure.
All right. I think we are good now. Yeah, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Cannabis Marketing Live. I'm your host, Jake Litkey. Today we have Andrew Rosenman on the show today. We are going to be talking about CTV, connected TV. But before we get into that, Andrew, maybe you could give us just a quick bio as it pertains to you've been working in CTV for a while and advertising as a whole. But tell us kind of how you found yourself here today on this webinar, whether you are happy about it or not.
Uh, so I had a bag thrown over my head and put in the back of the van, and I found myself here at this webinar.
Perfect.
No, so I'm thrilled to be here. Let's see, Andrew Rosenman, the president of Verizon Communications, founded the company in 2005, so we're going into our 20th year. I was a big agency guy and was really fortunate to have started working on advanced TV, what was called advanced TV or addressable TV, in the earlier part of the 21st century. So went out of agency, started building up these platforms at places like Comcast and Rogers and other places. Really enjoying that work. And now we are much more on the media side, and we are focused around media with a public purpose. So doing a lot of work for institutions and governments, getting messaging out using advanced TV that is beneficial to the public.
Right. That's great. Well, thank you for that. And before we get into CTV, I always like to start with a little bit of a primer on video in general, because there are a lot of different formats and people tend to use different terms that mean the same thing or sometimes not the same thing. So we have, let's see, we've got CTV, OTT, OLV, streaming, pre-roll, post-roll, mid-roll. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of video as an ad format available in the programmatic space, because that is what we're going to be talking about. We're not really talking about linear TV,
Right.
although in some cases it looks the same to consumers at this point. But for the digital programmatic stuff, maybe you could just do a quick primer so that as we start throwing out acronyms, people don't get overly confused.
Can I give you a couple of other acronyms for us
Yeah,
to?
sure. I'm trying. Which ones did I miss?
Well, I mean, clearly fast, right?
Oh, yes. And
Uh,
vast.
Vast and fast, right? Cousins, but not friends. And we should probably do AVOD, since that's just
Yeah.
two parts of the family we
Yep.
should, we should address. Sure. Where do you want to begin? I mean, in fact, one of the first things I did for the good folks in Philly at Comcast was build out an IP video advertising system back in 2006. Um, you want to talk about the programmatic side. So OLV, or online video, is anything that's showing up in your browser in a player, I'd say. I'd say, it gets a little, yeah. So let's say that, and let's leave
Okay.
mobile on its own, and sort of, in-app mobile versus mobile web. And so OLV to me is anything that shows up IP video in a player and a browser on your desktop.
Great. And then connected TV is generally referring to something like a Samsung or LG, like an actual television that either has smart TV functionality built into it, like it's got embedded Roku or something, or they've got some sort of box connected to it, whether that's Apple TV, Amazon Fire, Google, whatever it is. So connected TV, when I think about it, is the actual physical device they're looking at, which can fall in OLV to a certain extent because technically it's online. But usually when people are referring to OLV versus CTV, it's a different delivery endpoint and
Mhm.
subsequently different pricing, right?
Well, specifically, it's a different user agent too, right? So
Yeah.
if you really want to dig into it and start splitting hairs, I think the important thing to me about CTV has always been, and like this has been a bit of a holy grail. I mean, you're using all the great targeting and refinement and segmentations that we use in online advertising, and we're delivering it to the largest screen in the house with 100% viewability, 4K, high, stereo sound, high impact, right? And generally more than one person is watching at a time. So if you can, just as a delivery format for branded messaging, until you're into fully immersive, stuff, that's about as good as you're gonna get.
Yeah. So that's an important point you mentioned. There's definitely a lot of when you're running an impression on CTV, if it's on the TV itself, you, I don't know what the numbers are, maybe you do, but a lot of the time there's going to be more than one person seeing the ad, right? So you're kind of getting double, potentially triple the impression value, even though the ad units themselves tend to cost more.
I'd say the value of the impression, if look, what's great is now TV is transacting on an impression basis, right? People have been hoping for this for a long time. So here we have it. You get an integer, it's a countable number. The important part is less, what is that multiplier? Is it 1.3 people who saw it? To me, the value is sort of in the psychology of the family and the purchase influencer, right? So coming from automotive, like I did, there are some surprising things that you learn that the number one influencer on new vehicle make model purchase are children.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I know that.
yeah, and it sounds odd when you first hear it, but look, the parents are usually you're gonna come up with your consideration set, right? Like if you're not buying a Porsche 911 and you're not buying a minivan, like okay, it'll be a sedan and it'll be one of these particular brands. But when you get into, hey guys, what do we like the most? Kids go on the test drives, and yes, the partner and like, but yeah, huge influence on new vehicle purchase kids. So do you advertise to kids? No. Are you glad they're there to influence the purchase? Absolutely. And it goes through same in every category, right? So those additional people in the room, that's why TV works.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And something you were just referring to is the concept of, with traditional linear TV, this was generally bought on a DMA or maybe a zip code basis of like, or sometimes just a city where the ads are going to run. The value that you get with programmatic is you're now able to target specific households and use all of either your first party data that you have or third party data sets in order to serve impressions specifically to the people that you want.
True. And in theory, it's more efficient. You're talking about sort of on a localized basis. So when you were buying locally, you were buying the entire reach of whatever local asset you had. Now, some ways that's good. If you're a furniture retailer with 5 locations in that service area, that's great. You're reaching lots of people. But if you're, let's say you're a hospital, right? And you want people to choose, come to ours for these reasons. We've got the most specialists. You probably want to find a geo, right? And stick with it, as well as households that may be in need of it. Not the best example.
Yeah, I think more like if you've got a product that is targeted to a specific cohort of people, like whether
Mhm.
it's based on gender or income or something else, if you've got 100,000 people in the market, but really only 50,000 of them can be your customers, this gives you the ability to push your budget towards people that are going to be in your desired, audience, and not have the dreaded, wasted impressions.
Okay, so I'm gonna be a little bit of a devil's advocate on
Okay,
this,
good. Yeah, let's do it.
just because I can be, and it's actually not my example. It comes from a really bright fellow who worked for Unilever. Uh, Look, you can think of it as waste, or you can think of it as brand building. So the example was, the Dove brand was always very focused around women, and that was very much their thing. Not so long ago, they launched an extension of Dove into Dove Men. Now, you can say that those decades of Dove advertising that was intended for women to respond to was wasted on every man who saw it. Or you can say that that Dove brand established itself with those potential customers and made it possible for a multi-billion-dollar brand extension to happen somewhat overnight, right? Because
Yeah.
Dove Men was launched. So it depends on how you view waste, right? So uh, look, if you're selling a rideable lawnmower, yeah, not everybody has two mowable acres, which I think was one of those thresholds on a right, which is a great phrase. So two mowable acres, right? Not everybody has that, right? So somebody in an apartment building probably shouldn't be getting the John Deere riding mower ad. But if
Right.
you deliver that to folks who may be in market, and those are long cycles anyway. So again, strange example, but why not?
Yeah. Well, I do like mowable acres. That's a new phrase for me. So I like learning new phrases.
Credit to Bruce Anderson and the folks at NVIDIA who do addressable TV. I think that was always one of their case studies. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm borrowing it. And
Great.
full credit to Bruce because he's something of a genius.
Well, let's continue on with the awareness portion, right? So, in terms of the power of CTV as a brand awareness tool,
Yeah.
um, we work with lots of advertisers that are heavily focused on ROAS to sales on spend, and we see that a lot with any newer business. They're very, and they should be, they want to be focused on immediate revenue. But the counterpoint to that is that if you're just focusing at the bottom of the funnel, that's a finite number of people that exist at the bottom of the funnel, and you need to do some amount of awareness to put people into awareness and then consideration. So, do you have any examples of campaigns you've run for maybe a larger brand where they had a decent budget and they were running TV awareness and then the full funnel using other tactics behind it to support it and where you've seen success?
Sure. And actually, it's almost an adjacent category. So I worked for a time around hard spirits for one of the hard spirits makers.
Yeah.
And again, restricted category, self-imposed restriction on television advertising, actually. So it was never legislatively prohibited. It was the industry itself said, okay, we're not going to continue to advertise. They came back in recently. And so that marketing is really sophisticated and interesting because if you're launching, so this had to do with the launch of a premium spirit, and but it was on a brand that was already well known, just a new sort of extension of it. Spirits marketing is fascinating because quite a lot of it happens at retail, at HoReCa, hotel, restaurant, cafes. Everything from bar mats to signage to also shelf talkers at retail and things like that. So, yeah, this had to do with the introduction of a super premium version of a spirit. And it just made sense to be able to deliver that messaging specifically to households that would also encounter the messaging and the tactics that were 360 also in the environment, right? So none of this stuff stands alone. I think cannabis is fascinating, and I was in a conversation just this morning with an owner of a dispensary as well as a CBD business, getting ready for this, and really learned quite a lot. Um, that where the market is from a maturity perspective, so much of brand uh, so much of brand velocity in the cannabis space is built on word of mouth.
Hmm.
And that to me was fascinating. It's just a really interesting category to establish the bona fides and the what are the benefits, what are the product benefits of an individual brand because it's experiential.
Hmm.
So it's almost a case in the cannabis and the CBD and the wellness side that the messaging through CTV almost needs to reinforce what is already being generated in the culture about that brand. And whether it's value for money, which is one brand we were talking about, one is then there's deeply in the culture by working with rappers and other people. So I find the whole category fascinating. And I wish I had like a stock answer, but I'm still just getting immersed.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been encouraging our advertisers to push into CTV. I think that, and we do have an attribution solution now where we can measure, this household was served a CTV ad and then subsequently made a purchase on, whatever attribution window you want.
Yeah.
Uh, One of the bigger holdups that we've seen, though, is people being intimidated by the video production, right? So
Mm.
I think a lot of people in their mind think I need to create like a Super Bowl ad if I'm going to put something on TV. But if you go and are watching like a show on Amazon Prime Video or whatever, many of those ad units are not very sophisticated. Some of them are little more than like a slideshow with the QR code. Um, do you have any metrics that you've seen, even anecdotally, of campaigns that were run on CTV that were not sophisticated video productions, but still, performed well from a KPI perspective?
Yeah, for sure. So there's one financial services category client that we've been working with since 2019 on CTV. They're very forward, right? Which was great. Share of voice was fantastic in 2019 before people really knew about it. I can tell you that what we've seen in terms of unaided awareness, right, by the time they're being targeted by other things, but also, the messaging around financial services. Look, conquesting somebody in the financial services realm is a very long process, right? I don't know about you. Let me just ask, how long have you been with your primary bank?
It's like 20 years.
What are
Yeah.
the, I mean, what would it take to get you to just move all your primary banking? I think about all the, right, the
Yes.
vast.
Well, I'm actually in the process of doing that, and what it took was some bad experiences with the bank. Didn't have anything to do with advertising, had to do with the relationship I have with other bankers.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
there you have it. So something went wrong with your current provider. It wasn't that somebody else came along and said, "Hey, let me entice you to have to
Yeah.
go through all that." Right. So financial services are tricky, getting people to buy, investment products and think about the future and whatever they are. But what we've seen, and so we've got 5 years of data around the CTV and the efforts that we put in, and I can tell you, I mean, look, you know, I try to avoid certainty. I think certainty is a trap.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think the degree of education we've been able to put into those 30-second spots, right? What are the primary benefits that you will receive? I think we know categorically that those have been like, and we've demonstrated through research that that's been well communicated. So if your objective is to say, here are the three things that my product will do, it'll make your floor shiny, it'll, make you a better person, like whatever your claims are,
Yeah.
um, it it works if you're consistent. And the other part that you brought up is that, look, if you demand some sort of metric on what's my ROAS for every dollar I put in, you're kind of missing the point, right? Building a brand and that investment, all of that, all of that other lower funnel work that you're doing, direct response, kind of benefits from that, right? That tide has risen, but you're not going to continue to make that investment. Like once you've built your brand and you're cruising altitude and you've established it, you've actually staked out a claim, right? That's an ownable space. And I would encourage all brands in the cannabis space to think about their 40 acres and a mule
Hmm.
and claim that. Because if you don't, somebody else is going to be living on your land.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's talk more about awareness as I would call it a squishy metric. Um, I know there's lots of measurement tools for that, but especially in the cannabis space, all the brands are new from like the basic concepts of a brand, right? Everything that is out in the market now hasn't been out for more than a decade at most. Maybe some of the legacy California brands have some, local brand awareness, but to the broader market, the brand awareness portion, like so we started working with a large delivery service. And this is actually several, dispensary chains we've worked with where they had invested a bunch of money early on in billboards, right? And there were people that maybe thought that was a bad idea or a good idea. But I can definitely tell you for companies that we work with that made that investment earlier on and got their name at least in the psyche of the general populace of the market, the subsequent digital advertising we did, programmatic, banner ads and
Right.
basic video ads and things like that, they vastly outperform a brand that had not done that, right? Um, and so I think TV is a good medium for that. However, I think a lot of people are hung up on trying to measure it in a way. They're trying to measure it the way they would measure like direct response campaigns, and they're kind of skipping a part of the traditional marketing process. So I've tried to have this conversation many times. I'd be curious as to how you would approach that conversation if you were talking to an advertiser that is uh afraid of doing, let's get past the creative production part. Let's say they've got that figured out. Now they're
Mhm.
looking at, okay, you really need to spend, thousands of dollars, a bunch of them, to do an effective campaign. How do you arm the marketer to go back to their CFO or their owner and say, this is a good investment?
Well, you can either lean on, okay, here are the attributes of connected TV that are differentiated and valuable, right? Where, it's a high impact ad, retention and recall is so much higher when it's TV versus, people have banner blindness, and we could talk about all the other you know, it is a branding vehicle. So establishing the name. So your out of home example is fascinating, right? And I think the reason why it works is, look, that billboard is stationary, right? So
Yeah.
it is hitting a certain group of people who will be in that environment, and that's, by definition who it is. The portability of a TV ad and the targetability of a TV ad now with CTV is sort of an extraordinary opportunity, right? So now I can stick that billboard into a living room, right, of choice.
Yeah.
And that is super powerful, right? Because the activation side comes later. It can come through any of those other mechanisms, right? And digital, standard targeting, display, and the other things that you do in retargeting. But look, it's not going to be a free for all forever, right? People come up with portfolios of brands that fit into their lifestyle and that sort of match their values. And you, as a marketer, need to establish what those values are, and to your responsibility is to put that out into the marketplace to attract the people who share those values. That's all that I wish there's no dark art here. That's the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. They're TV ads. Um, What about some examples of where you've taken a CTV activation for a brand and you have tailored the creative itself towards multiple audiences, right? And how did you see, like, what were the tactics that were used to do that? And what kind of output did you see at all in terms of performance?
So the example, it's good. It's probably worth talking about. Campaign or brand, same advertiser, multicultural side, right? And objectively, the idea was, look, we want to reach and activate multicultural audiences, both Hispanic American, African American, Asian American, and it turns out that behaviorally around the particular part of the financial services category, they were different, right? The values were different, values around savings, values around investing, values around self-directed versus guided, right? All of those things. And those things expose themselves through research. And then you use that as an input to say, okay, the benefits claims that we're making to the Hispanic American audience are going to be slightly different than they are to the African American audience, the Asian American audience. And so that's a very it's a really clear example of how take your inputs, right? Get your insights, adjust your messaging to meet your market. Don't expect them to come to you, because the general market messaging wasn't as effective. And so what we found, we actually saw meaningful change in response rates.
Yeah. You could do a similar concept with inside the cannabis industry because, within the cannabis industry itself, there's a lot of different types of use cases, right? You can always use the example of like people that like high THC vape carts versus people that like sleep gummies, right? They're fundamentally different products. They just happen to be the same category of, plant that made it. Um, so in that case, you could do sort of product differentiation, right? So if you had, let's say you've got a customer list, who your vape users are, and you know who your gummy purchasers are, you could be running a campaign, same brand, but different product offerings in the creative itself to different audiences.
So, one of the things I learned through, my days being a recovering agency guy now, but I think is still true is you never sell features, you sell benefits, right?
Okay.
So for the gummy customer, so I'll give you an example. We never talked about speed, maximum speed or acceleration. We talked about performance. We never talked about braking, right? And cornering. We talked about safety, right?
Yeah.
So, for somebody who's suffering from insomnia, right, you're meeting a particular consumer need. For somebody who's dealing with anxiety, social anxiety, right, which apparently is accelerating like crazy since COVID, you're meeting a consumer need, right?
Okay.
Same with THC, right? It may be that people want, high potency for whatever reason. Let's not, dissect their reasoning. But I would suggest that marketers come to understand what need state their products fulfill and build messages around fulfilling needs versus around their product dimensions.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, needs versus features. That's a good point. Um,
Okay, that's one for me. I'm putting that
yeah,
on.
yeah, we'll keep a scoreboard. I think you're up more than 1 point. So on, dovetailing into that, we sometimes get new advertisers, and they want to run ads, and they want to run ads to basically just their shop page, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and they're skipping that sort of need benefit part of the conversation that should happen with the consumer as to why do they want these things versus just here's things that I have to sell. Do you think that you can leverage CTV effectively to prepare someone prior to landing on a shopping experience, in a similar way that, like, usually if you're doing just digital campaign, online banners or native or whatever, you usually want to take someone to a landing page that's tied to the activation, right? So here's the particular product or feature that we're selling. We take
Right,
you to a landing page. We do some validation, earn some trust, so some social proof, all of that. Say, look, this is the sales pitch effectively, and then you go to the shopping experience.
right.
Have you seen um, examples of like TV activations where you can do enough in 30 seconds to get the person to a point where they can just go and purchase more than if they just went to the site from clicking on a link?
I don't know that the duration is right for that. I mean, I tell you, I think I was thinking about this today when I was speaking with the fellow who's the dispensary owner. A QVC for cannabis would be the best channel ever. Right? It just would, right? Because QVC moves a ton of merchandise, right? Why? Because it's just nothing but like a barker channel for product. It's just people, telling you this is wonderful, advocating for the product in like 10 or 15-minute sort of chunks. And it's long enough to tell a complex story. Is 30 seconds long enough to tell a convincing, complex story? Maybe, maybe.
Well, that's not a bad idea. Should we go start a channel?
I think we should, and I think the truth is, we'd probably print money if we did it. And you just invite in, I was thinking about it, like some of the most look at cookies, right? Like he's aggregating brands, right?
Yeah.
He's finding and he's bringing in product, and then people, immediately there's like the imprimer of okay, it's coming under the umbrella of somebody I already trust. Let me let me consider it. So yeah, I mean, I do that in a minute. You just gotta organize everyone to come on in. I think there is that middle step. I think you're right. You're talking about it. I think that middle step may just be at retail though. And so that's where things are really this industry is different than most, right? Because your product selection from retail location to retail location is going to vary like orders of magnitude.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, look, I'm in New Jersey, right? We've got it's a little bit different here. If you establish a brand and a desire for a particular brand, what I'm told is that people walk into these retail establishments saying, "I want X," right? They've got a picture of it on their phone. They already know what they want, which is good. You just got to make sure you have it.
Yeah. That makes sense. All right. Let's talk about KPIs and outcomes. You've mentioned some campaigns where you were doing, split testing with different multicultural segments, and you said that, there were positive performance indicators. What is someone going to try to look for from a positive indicator other than like obviously just like did sales go up, right? Um, how do
Well,
you talk about that?
I mean, like, did sales go up? Did inquiries go up? Right. I mean, you're driving somebody to the great thing is a lot of this is direct to consumer, right? So brands themselves have their own ability to move merchandise, right, from their own owned and operated domains, which is great. They also have distributors, right, which is, there's a bit of channel conflict going on there. You got distributors advertising, telling people to buy, multi-product from them. You've got individual brands advertising, saying buy my brand, you could buy it direct, buy it from somebody else. I think the KPIs I would look for, I would start with the basic KPIs. Did I deliver in full? Right? What percentage of my total addressable market did I reach? At what frequency? And do I even know what frequency is necessary to start driving performance metrics? I would do that first.
Yeah, well, let's dig in on frequency then, because that's something that people have different opinions about.
Sure.
Um, when you're talking to a brand, doesn't matter whatever the size, it could be a city or state or national, whatever. Um, what are some guidelines that you would give people in terms of frequency? Like how many ads to an actual household of the same ad are served in a week or day or month? Let's just get rid of all the political stuff because we know how that works and talk about the real world, so to speak. How do you think about that?
I think about it in a couple of ways. First of all, try not to think of it in a silo. Like people always talk about, well, what's my frequency on my TV campaign? Well, if you're also on radio and you're doing direct mail and you're doing, right? You need to contemplate all those points of contact that a consumer may have with your brand, right? So the frequency by channel is almost an arbitrary number, right?
Okay.
And you want to look in some categories, mature categories, a lot of media plans start with television. So you figure out the optimal frequency for a campaign. And by the way, that can change over the course of a campaign, right? You may want, 2x the frequency you have at the beginning of a 5-week campaign than you have at the end, right? Because you've established it and you're sort of moving into other tactics by the end. So there is no set answer. The only advice I would give would be to say, if TV is where you're starting,
Mhm.
then start there and then calculate the frequency of what you need and everything else, including your digital media, your native and your display and your OLV as a complement to it. Now, if you're already doing those other things and you're coming in and you're starting to do CTV, you really need to think about, okay, am I, is this excess? And the other thing is make sure that you're actually reaching the same people. One of the hardest things to do with CTV is to, sort of make sure that that reach is matching your digital reach.
And what do you mean by that? Like, where's the difficulty?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of, it sounds like you have a solution, right? So you're able to retarget people who've been exposed to CTV
Oh,
campaigns. Is that right?
correct. Yeah, that is correct.
Great. That really wasn't the case a couple of years ago. It
Yeah.
wasn't so perfect. And, let's be honest, Jake, right? Your solution is probably going to keep getting better. So as good
Yeah.
as it is today, it will keep improving. But that, just connecting the formats, it's not this, look, you can probably understand your reach across your native display, native display and OLV. Simple, right? It's cookie based probably, or a third party ID, right?
There's a few different identifiers. I guess I was looking for more philosophical of, there's some old adages around a consumer needs to see your brand 10 times or 15 times or a dozen times or 20. And I'm mostly talking about newer brands because a lot of the brands, there's no household brands really in cannabis. So if someone says, okay, well, I want to put my budget together, I want to reach these 50,000 people that are in the market around my store, and my CPM is $30 or whatever it ends up being, um, how many dollars should I be spending on those 50,000 people in order to get at least some seed of brand awareness on CTV, and then ideally follow up with some, cheaper formats, and amplify that message?
Well, not all 50,000 of those people will be reachable on CTV, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So your universe may not be 50. So the first thing to figure out is what is my actual addressable universe? Then the question becomes, and look, there's no perfect way to do this. If you're establishing a new brand, particularly in a category that's, I mean, okay, so it's 50,000 that you are certain are open to messaging around a controlled category.
Sure. Let's just assume that we've done a reach analysis and we think we can reach 50,000 people via CTV that are inside of our target cohort.
Okay. I wouldn't go light, let's put it that way. I would not have an upper threshold, set it super high, set it, 20 or 30 or something like that. There's really no downside when you're establishing a brand to being too noticed. Right?
Yeah.
The diminishing returns will happen later, but not in the early phase. That's
Yeah. But I mean, we have a similar thing. I mean, even with just programmatic display, we'll have conversations with people, and let's say it's a national, I'll put that in quotes because national hemp is not really national, but let's say the legal states,
sure.
and they've got a budget, they want to spend $20,000, and you're like, that's not, you don't want to target the country with that because your impressions are going to be so dispersed that you're going to get a handful of people that all see one impression, right? So you want to get dozens of impressions in front of someone, ideally. So what we tell people is like, okay, well, pick for that, but if that's your budget, like pick a city, right? Or if it's a large city, pick a handful of zip codes where you can actually get some brand equity out of the investment. Otherwise, I feel like it's kind of a wasted effort if it's too dispersed.
I was thinking about this earlier, just from the conversation I had with the dispensary owner earlier. I think the objective at this point for brands in the cannabis field is potentially use those budgets to create advocates, because those connector advocates in the communities are going to be able to amplify that brand message into the cohort in a way that media may not be able to. So in an even more concentrated way, see if you can figure out who is that maven in the group, right? Like, what does that profile look like? Who is a thought, influencer? And, build your media effort around converting people who will convert other people.
I see. So in that instance, maybe it's identifying a smaller target audience that you think fall into this sort of Maven category and then focusing budget towards them.
I mean, I don't think you can, I don't think it's one or the other, right? On the one hand, if you have a cohort and all right, these are potential consumers, right? And potentially they're, potentially they're already buying other brands, right? Which is how you about them. What you don't know is why. You're coming at it with it's almost the, sort of brute force approach of, I know that they're currently buying in this category. I'm going to tell them things about my product. I would say that it's probably a better use of money to figure out why they're buying that particular brand for, whether or not it's for insomnia, whether it's for, arthritic pain, right? If it's for, mental health and wellness, if it's for focus and concentration, whatever the consumer rationale is, if you can get to that, then your spend can be that much more efficient. But again, I'm still a huge believer in creating advocates, because we're just in the development of this marketplace, right? That's where it's happening. It's kind of ground up.
Yeah. How would you talk to someone who's, let's say they're new to advertising? We frequently run into this. We run into dispensers or brands that have done really no advertising, right? And they're just trying to get into it. So you're operating on a complete blank slate from a media perspective. And it doesn't matter what the budget is. So let's just say it's just X, right? And we're gonna say that we're gonna slice that pie up, that budget up between CTV, brand awareness work, targeted programmatic, potentially some other channels like you mentioned, like radio or mailers. Um, and I know this is a difficult question to answer, so I'm looking for really sort of broad ideas. Would you say, like, okay, take half your budget, put it towards brand awareness, put half your budget or a quarter of it over here to retention and a quarter over here to like offers, or um where's a starting point for someone who's done nothing, right? In terms of budget allocation amongst these different types of formats.
I mean, I'd look at the area of influence, right? The AOI. I mean, so much of this revolves around your latitude and longitude of where you can access the product, right? If it's e-commerce, it's not, right? If it's direct, but if this really is drive to retail, understand that retail environment, understand what digital out of home may be available, right, within that specific radius, right? Make sure you're capturing that. Make sure you are saturating those touch points, right? Because that's really going to give you a lot of value early on. Um, if it's straight up, look, we're national, you can order our stuff from anywhere um, because it's possible. I think you're right. I don't think 20 grand for a full national campaign is going to do it. I mean, look, I don't have the specific answer. Again, it comes down to, I think the important thing to try for people who don't have experience in advertising to realize is you're not chasing a single transaction. You're chasing loyalty, right? And you're chasing brand loyalty. And once you've established that, the transactions become less expensive and less difficult to make. But if
Yeah,
you treat advertising as, a coin operated thing, I put this money in, I get this out, then every transaction is going to have effectively the same sort of cost. Brand allows you to reduce that cost over time and to maintain those customers over time. If you have to recapture a customer every time,
that's
that's the difference between durable brands and folks who come and go.
yeah. Got a sort of two-part question then. One is, have you seen any data points on the amount of brand equity or stature that is given psychologically for someone seeing an ad on TV versus seeing an ad on a website or on their phone? And the second part of that is that I think everyone has experienced this at some point when there's a product that you like, that you have an affinity with, and you have it in your life. And when you see the ad for it on TV, there's a level of validation there. They're like, oh yeah, look, that's my, shoe company or whatever it is, right? I have that thing. And I know in automotive, you probably know this, a more accurate number. I've heard it was like half or something, but some large portion of the automotive budgets, especially for luxury brands, are being served specifically to existing owners to make them continue to feel good about the brand purchase that they made in the past, so that when they go to get a new car, they still want to stick with that brand. So I know I asked you like three questions in one there, so I'll let you answer it however you like.
Well, I mean, if you're okay, whatever architecture you built this brand on, right? You need to be consistent, right? You can't necessarily go from saying, here are the great things about this brand, and then change it radically the next time. Um, you know, uh, so that's important. I think you're right about reinforcing and reestablishing. Yeah, repurchase is everything, right? Particularly on long considered purchase, right? Share of driveway, right? You're only getting a shot at that every 3 to 7 years, right? On in this category, it's still really important, right? Because think about it. If you know precisely this is my brand, there are shared values that we have, whether it's organic or it's tested and approved by a third party, whatever that is. Like this is a different sort of thing, right? This is something you put into your body, right? This is something, right, which changes the calculus. It really does. It makes it much more like I don't want to say a pharmaceutical, but it really is a different calculation from a psychological perspective. So, but it's less of an expression of who you are, right? I wear these clothes, or this is the mark of car that I drive. But important nonetheless. Re Repurchase is the ultimate KPI.
Yeah. So what about circling back to the first part of my statement in terms of have you ever seen any studies or data that show the difference in value psychologically for a consumer to see a brand on TV in their living room when they're watching a show versus an ad while they're checking the weather on their phone? There's got to be some subconscious like, elevation of the fact that your brand's on TV.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on with what is it, attention metrics these days, and,
Yes.
and it's fascinating to see that come to the fore and how it's being measured and eye tracking, and they've got these things. There's a company called T-Vision that has a measurement uh, product that's in the home and checks whether or not people are paying attention. So the psychological, the validation part, yeah, you get your validation for seeing it there, but I think human beings are also just, I mean, we're sort of basic, right? Like you get validation from people, right? Much more than you get validation
That's
from.
why you see celebrities in the TV ads.
You can. I mean, look, recognize it. Look, projecting yourself into a scene. It's the reason why I like advertising is, so much of it is aspiration, right? And so, um, I think the role of advertising is more to make you consider, right, from a consideration perspective, being, part of that, what you see the lifestyle, which is why I think so much of the culture stuff around cannabis is so important, right? Whether it's these cultural ambassadors endorsing the products, like that's high value stuff. And putting that onto TV would just be great. So maybe we figured something out here, Jake. It's QVC for cannabis with cultural ambassadors coming and doing
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, you got to have segments for all the different cultural categories. They get like, a half hour spot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, you get your Martha Stewart of weed, right?
Yeah.
She, just doing like here, right? There could be line extensions. Here's your bakeware and other stuff. Like I'm sure there's somebody right now in Silicon Valley pitching this idea as they hear it live to a venture guy,
Yeah.
and
That'll be
you and I
funded by
are
tomorrow.
right. Oh yeah, no, it's the SPAC just closed, right? We're not even off
Oh,
the
don't say it's back.
it's done. It's done.
I thought so. I mean, are people still doing SPACs? I thought they would kind of all died off, but maybe that's still happening.
That's so 2022, I guess. But
Yeah, it's old
yeah,
news.
no, I mean, look, we're sitting here divulging like the greatest idea ever. But maybe tune in next week and we'll try
Well,
it somehow.
yeah, we'll start. Well, we could start with like not a full 24-hour channel, but a some segments like a couple hours a day. I guess I mean you have two challenges. You're going to need some really good ventilation in the studio.
Mhm.
Uh, and probably you might have some issues launching your episodes on time, depending on, who's in charge of the production that week.
Right. And and cue cards. Why don't we start this way? I still think Shark Tank for cannabis would be key.
I've
Right.
seen that happen at conferences a little bit, like little mini ones where they have
Okay.
like a pitch competition. But I haven't seen one broadcast like as a,
I could just only imagine like it being declared a tie every time. Like it's all great. It's all
yeah, it's
great.
all great. Well, you'd have to build that into the like the league rules, right? Which is ties are not allowed.
Right. That's it. Sudden death. Right.
Yeah.
Whoever
Well, I
can't
mean,
get.
yeah, you force people to vote and have an odd number of, judges. I think
Or
we
just
could make
odd judges.
well, they're probably going to be odd judges, at least some of them.
Sure. I mean, they're not going to be, your typical Supreme Court nominee, but I think
Yeah.
Kavanaugh would play. I think he'd get in there. He likes, seems like
Yeah.
a, um,
Maybe we should go to Shark Tank and pitch the idea of Shark Tank for cannabis to be very
on Shark Tank.
on Shark Tank. Yes.
Yeah, let's go.
There we go. All right, good.
Okay,
Now we're doing next week.
it's done.
All right, so we're kind of wrapping up on time, but I wanted to talk a little bit about storytelling and
Mhm.
branding. I am a broken record on this. I tell people this all the time. Marketing is about storytelling. Human beings connect with stories. That's your most powerful way that you can communicate.
Mhm.
Um, Television represents, I think, a much greater opportunity to do storytelling because generally you have their attention for a 15 or 30 or 45-second spot. Maybe they walk out of the room, but a lot of people are going to be looking at it. It's not surrounded by a bunch of other things. And you've got a block of time where you get to actually talk to the consumer,
Mhm.
right? Rather than just hoping that they'll read your ad or hoping that they'll read a native ad or whatever it is. So when you enable that level of communication between the brand and the consumer, what are some guidelines that you would give someone, again, someone who's never done this before, of how you best use that, right? Because some people might think, oh, I've got this ad, I do my Green Wednesday sale, and I'm going to put that on TV, right? And yes, you're going to get a little bit better attention, but you're not really leveraging the opportunity that you have.
Yeah, that's not really a story, is it? Right?
Now,
Like a price promotion isn't a story. Um, the three P's of marketing and all that. I think you're absolutely right. I think advocacy, I think testimonials go a long way. I think if you're establishing a brand that sits across multiple products, though, and this really is about brand, right? So there are what 11 different varieties of Coca-Cola these days, right? But Coke brand is what creates the interest in, oh, that flavor, less sugar, less caffeine, whatever is there. So if you have a, multi-brand, right? Or multi-product portfolio underneath the brand, I would keep it very high level. Choose the two, maybe three things that you want people to think and associate with your brand. And a lot of this comes down to look, brand design is not easy. You got to choose your name, your colors, your sound, how the brand voice, right? Don't think that it just sort of falls out like, oh, yeah, it's the name of my company, right? No, you need to really calculate this and make sure that it's authentic and can be delivered in a way that you believe in and you can replicate. So keep it tight, right? Decide, what are we saying? How do we want to say it? What does it feel? What does our brand feel like? And I think you're right. A lot of folks in the category haven't taken the moment to do that, but
mhm.
it's the part where I get to say, I'm happy to help them do that. I've done this a couple times. I would have a lot of fun doing that with an emerging cannabis brand.
Yeah, and so that is an exercise that you can go through with someone, right? And help them. Okay, they're like, all right, I'm going to do it. I want to get on TV. I want to tell my story.
Mhm.
When you work with companies, do you actually will take the time if they want to sit down and kind of help them come up with their story and what they should be saying?
Absolutely. I came from a full service agency. Like I'm not just a media guy, right? Like yeah. And in fact, that's the only way to get it to really work. Um, and to feel, you have to go through some of these processes so that the brands feel great about their choices, right? This is who we are. Part of deciding who you are as a brand is deciding who you're not.
Yeah.
And it's the hard thing for folks to do. Everybody wants to appeal to everybody, but the most successful brands understand that their appeal is specific.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a conversation we have pretty frequently because, we start off the conversation say, who are you trying to reach? And unfortunately, most of the time the answer is everyone, right? Then we need to have a conversation about that. And you can approach it from a number of ways. If you want to just give them like the reality of the situation is you don't have enough money to reach everyone. So let's not try and do that just to start with. But the the other thing is you need to understand that for again storytelling to be effective, it needs to resonate with the person you're talking to. And people are very different from each other. So you can't have one activation that is going to be effective on everyone. So design your activation around a specific group of people, try to connect with them in a voice that they appreciate, and don't try to send that message as much as possible to people that are either going to be like apathetic about that message or on the worst side actually dislike it.
Well, voice is something that's going to run through every message that you ever send in the future. So get real comfortable with how you sound, how you present, right?
Mhm.
Messages can change. You might end up with a price promotion for Green Wednesdays. That might happen, but it has to come in surrounded by whatever you've decided your brand feels like.
Yeah, yeah, agree. All right. Well, we're closing up on the hour here. Are there any tidbits you want to convey, things I didn't ask you that maybe you
We have two questions. I'm looking at the Q&A because I'm a
oh,
heck of a good guest.
oh yeah. All right. I didn't actually see the questions there. Sorry about that. Let's see. Okay, we have a question about Massachusetts has to be 85% over 21. That number varies by state. Sometimes it's 73. New York, I think, is 90. How can CTV accommodate this? You want to take this one?
My understanding is that, sort of age gating on TV is nowhere near as complicated. CTV is nowhere near as complicated as online, right?
Yeah. So
I
the way
mean,
that the way that we do it is by targeting households at based on the demographics we know about that household, right? So we know whether or not there's a presence of children. We know the general age range of those households. And you can devise a media plan to be in compliance with those rules. That's actually like kind of one-on-one for everything that we have to do, knowing age and geography is everything. Like we have now, there's just last week in I forget which state it was, but there's a specific set of cities
mhm.
that have outlawed hemp products in this case, right? And obviously you've got different legalization, but it's not even at the state level. Sometimes it's down to the county or city level where we
Municipal.
have to do blackouts and like, okay, we can't run any ads here in this circle, but we can run them over here. And then of course, making sure that we're targeting households and channels that are for mature audiences.
Great.
Other question here. Partner for historical look back data. Okay, so yeah, this is for walk-ins. So this is, and we use this tactic quite a bit. This is Susan, I forget what company you're with. If you want to put in the chat, I'll mention you. But this is a tactic that we use for all kinds of digital, which
Mhm.
is drawing polygons around physical locations,
Yeah.
finding device IDs that have been seen in that location, and then using that as a target audience. We use this all the time for dispensary visitors, right? So we have all the dispensaries geoframed. We've got an audience of device IDs that have been seen there. And
Mhm.
we do also have a device identity graph so we can correlate those devices back to the households in which they reside, which then will allow you to do CTV targeting once you know the household level data. Cumulus Media, that was Susan from Cumulus Media mentioning that. So it's a highly effective tactic. It works well for a lot of things, and not just for cannabis. It can be for anything. We use it for restaurants or gyms or any way, any tactic you can come up with that involves understanding your target consumer's past physical behavior comes into play here. And I've seen some very creative uses of this with some campaigns before. So
Good, good to know.
All right. Andrew, anything else while we have you today?
No, thank you for
Good to
having me.
listen.
I was a little nervous about it, but this was fun.
Yeah, yeah, it's not too hard. Maybe you can close up. Andrew Rosenman, what's the name of your company? How can people reach you if they want to
Arise
find your voice
Communications.
and get on there?
There is a new website that's coming. I should really sort of finalize. You can find us, find me on LinkedIn if you like. It's a good way right now. So going into year 20 of doing this, so the name that will be coming in 2025 is similar, but we're kind of speaking of branding, it's kind of a rebranding, a rebirth.
Yeah,
Um, not quite 21, so it might not be legal yet, but we will be by 2026. Yeah, I'd love to hear from anyone, 212-398-2121. Speaking of 21, call us here in New York, or find us on LinkedIn. This is a pleasure. Love to work with brands in this category. I find it just fascinating and also, just difficult enough to make it really like fun.
yeah, yeah. It is challenging, but not boring. So
May you never be bored. Thanks for doing this, Jay.
yeah.